Well, hi folks. Hey, I hope this video goes okay audio wise. There's a lot of wind. We've had heavy winds all day, and I'm hoping the wind will cooperate with me a little bit. So what is this video about? Well, the title, An Axe Tale. Okay, that's just what it is. It's a tale about an axe. Now, this is kind of a Sty story. It's something kind of in the recent past, but I'm taking it beyond the Sty story. And the reason I call it an axe tale is I can tell you my story, but I have to speculate on the axe's story. So it goes from story to tale. So let's get on with it. So what am I talking about in axe tale? Right here. See this? See this old axe here off on my right side here? Stuck in a nice maple chopping block. There's a story behind that axe. Now, about 5 years ago, I was recovering, still in the process of recovering from a major heart attack and open heart surgery. Terrible experience. In order to recover fully, I decided I need to get out in the woods and start hiking. Now, it had been about 9 months after I had had that surgery, and I realized hiking around town trying to recover just wasn't doing it. I needed to get out in the woods. So I decided I was going to go visit Foster Falls. Now, folks that have watched my channel before probably have seen some of my videos visiting Foster Falls. Well, so I took off to Foster Falls, and I thought that's a good way to start out. Recovering, getting outdoors again, and getting back into the enjoyment of the great outdoors. Now, Foster Falls is less than a quarter of a mile from where you park to hike down a trail and through the woods down to the falls. About a quarter mile. The whole trip is a half mile or less. Well, I got to Foster Falls and I was so glad to be there. I just love that place. I decided at Foster Falls, below, downstream from there, down the river, there's 2 more waterfalls. Very few people know about them, and I have never seen anybody else at the other 2 falls when I've hiked into them. There's no trail to these falls. You have to bushwhack. You have to go through the woods, down through these rocky ravines and over hills, and you're following the river. But again, it's no more than a quarter mile down to the next waterfall. And then from that one, no more than a quarter mile to the next. So your whole trip might work out to about a mile and a half at the most, I would say. Going in there and coming back out. Mile and a half or so. So I struck out, went to the second waterfall. Loved it. Oh, it was great, and they were flowing so nice, and it's a beautiful waterfall. And I thought, well, I'm out here, why not head for the third waterfall? So I did. I headed for the third waterfall. Now, the third waterfall, it's more rugged. There's no trails in there for those 2 waterfalls at all. You find your way through the woods. You're weaving and climbing, and yeah, it's a mess. You're bushwhacking. Well, I got to this spot right above the waterfalls that I'm looking, and it's just thick pines all around me, all over. And I'm standing there, and I'm thinking, well, I got to get through all these pines. I'm going to push all the boughs out of the way to get through and force my way to the river's edge, because the river's right there. I mean, it's maybe 30, 40 feet away from where I'm at. And I can hear the waterfalls. It's just off to the left another 25, 30 feet, and there's a big waterfall. So I thought, I'm so close, I'm so close. I was just going to start breaking through the brush to get down to the water's edge, down the river's edge, and I realized, look at this. And here's a big pine tree, and it's got a big ring of rock around it. And I thought, what in the world? Who did that? First of all, how'd you haul that rock in here through all this timber and brush? And I went over and I checked it out. Well, the rock on the inside edge, all the way around that rock, it was black, charred. And that's when I realized, and I took my knife, I started poking around in there. It's an old fire pit. That's when I realized that pine tree grew in the center of that old fire pit. Well, I figured out about how big that tree, across was at the base, at the trunk, And I knew personally, I don't know how old that tree is, but I would think it'd got to be close to 50 years old, that tree. And it grew up in the center of that old fire pit. But then I realized, what's a fire pit doing out here in the middle of nowhere? And I'm looking around, it's all trees. I mean, you can't walk 4 or 5 feet without hitting a tree. It's all trees, and brush. And I kneeled down and I'm picking around in that fire pit, hoping I might find an old knife blade or a file or some old artifact in that fire pit, And I'm kind of looking off in the trees, and I see an old maple, hard maple stump. And see this axe? See how it's sitting, stuck in my chopping block here? That's exactly the way it looked out there, stuck in that maple stump. Now, to get to the axe, I literally had to crawl through and push branches out of the way. And it was all grown in with pines. But that axe is right in the middle of all those thick pines stuck in that stump. I got to it, and the top of that stump had all kinds of old axe marks in it, So obviously, a lot of camp wood had been chopped on that old stump. Well, I didn't realize it until after the fact. First thing I did was I was just like, wow, check it out, this neat old axe. Grabbed it and took it out of the stump. Immediately I go, oh no. What did I do? What did I just do? Well, I just kind of changed history by taking that axe out of its stump. I thought, I don't know how long that axe has been sitting there in that stump. It's been a long time with all this timber and everything growing around it. It's been a very long time. Then I kind of got looking around and I realized I'm standing on a not terribly large flat area, and there's no rock. It's just perfectly flat with a lot of trees, a lot of thick timber, and some big trees like the one in the fire pit. Then I realized that about 25 feet from that fire pit, all the way around on that flat spot, all of a sudden the trees were much bigger, and there were a lot less smaller trees. And it came to mind. That's the edge of the campsite. This was at one time an actual campsite, and those larger trees were the original forest this campsite was set up in. How neat. Right by the river's edge. Waterfall is just off to the left a little bit. You can just hear that waterfall running. Awesome place to have a campsite. So, with that little bit of knowledge, I had the axe. I walked down, checked out the waterfalls. I was very happy with them. They were beautiful. Well, then, I hiked out of there. And a couple weeks later, I ran into a friend of mine that's a forester. He works for the forestry. And I was telling him about how I found the axe. Because he had seen the axe, and he goes, "Boy, that's an old axe." There's a story. And I told him the story. And I told him the size of that tree, the species of pine tree it was. And he said that tree had to be at least 60 years old. He says, "I'm certain of it. It has to be at least 60 years old." Well, I told him that would put it back. If it was 60 years old, that would put it back to sometime between 1955 and 1965 that tree started growing in that fire pit. So the last time that campsite was ever used was somewhere between 1955 and 1965, over 60 years ago. Boy, was that enlightening. And he said, "Well, if you want to know the exact age of the tree, I'll go out and I'll do a core on it." I said, "No, don't touch the tree. Leave the tree alone." I said, "We got a close enough idea." And he goes, "Now that axe," he said, "the way you found that out in the woods right there and that stump would have been inside their campsite area. So yeah, that's where they were processing their camp wood, right?" And he says that means that axe has been stuck in that stump for 60 years. And nobody's touched it. He says, "You know what?" He says, "If you don't mind," he says, "I'll take that axe with me." He says, "My brother-in-law, as a hobby, does blacksmithing, and he collects old axes and hatchets. Lots of old woodworking tools." He said, "I bet you he can age that. He can tell you when that was probably close to when it was made." I said, "That's cool. Yeah, go ahead, take it." Well, he brought it back to me about a month later, and he says, "Yeah, finally got my brother-in-law to look at it." He says there's some stamping on it. Now, I don't remember what the stamps are on it and what they mean. He does. He understands them. But he says, his brother-in-law said, that axe was made sometime between 1904 and 1910. Well, that makes that axe over 100 years old. Well, you look at the head of it, and it's curled, the metal is curled over from being pounded on with a sledgehammer. So that thing has split a heck of a lot of wood to be curled over like that. And it's been sitting out in the woods for 60 years, so that it got curled over way back when. So there you go. Sty finds an axe that's been stuck in a stump for 60 years. Finds out that that axe is over 100 years old. The handle, he figures, was probably replaced sometime in the 1950s. The handle's kind of warped, but it feels good in my hands. And it was so dry. But now it's got some moisture coming back to it, and the handle's gotten smooth again from my use. Because I've been splitting wood with this ever since 2015. 6 years now. Now, if that axe was made, let's say 1910, and it was stuck in that stump in 1960, that means that axe was 50 years old when it got stuck in that stump, and they packed up camp, they left and forgot their axe. And there it sat for 60 years in the woods. What? I want to know that axe's tale, its story, for those 50 years. Wouldn't that be amazing? If that axe could talk, everything that axe did for that first 50 years, and then it got stuck in a stump and forgotten about and abandoned. That first 50 years, that goes right through the prime logging period of that area, the 1920s, early 30s, major logging in that area. Now that particular spot has not been logged since then. They just let it come back as natural growth. And they have no intentions of logging it because it's right on the river edge. They don't want to get that close to the water, right? So that would have, if I wouldn't have found that, it would have still been sitting there, because I guarantee it, that was found purely by accident. If I wasn't down, kneeling on the ground and looking under those trees, I would have never saw that axe mixed in with all the pines and everything that were there. Well, so that first 50 years, gosh knows how many trees did that axe cut down, how much firewood did that axe split, what has that axe done, how many people have touched it and used it. Then I got to thinking, well, now wait a minute, what about the last 60 years, if that axe could talk? How many people walked through those woods so close to that axe could feel them? They're so close, they're right there. How many people hiked into those waterfalls, walked right past that fire pit and that axe in that thick timber? I just, like I said, by accident stumbled across the fire pit. If that thing could tell me about those 60 years, I would spend days, if not weeks, listening to this axe's stories over the last 110 years. It would be absolutely amazing to be able to hear this axe's stories of all those years. Anything we can conjure up that axe may have done over its first 50 years. It's all speculation. It's all tale. It's all, we're making tales if we talk about what it did its first 50 years. Because we don't know what it was used for, or how it was used, or who used it. It's the same for its last 60 years. Stuck in that stump. And everything that went on, all the trees growing around it, the change of the landscape, the floods, the dry periods, the fires, the people that hiked right past it, all of that. Those are tales to be made. So I can sit here and I can think about that axe in those 60 years and the prior 50, and I can come up with lots of tales, lots of axe tales. You wouldn't believe what this axe did. You wouldn't believe what this one fellow did with that axe. I could yarn a bunch of tales doing that, and but we do know this axe's story since I found it. And that's it. That's all we know about it. Except its age. Isn't that something? Isn't that something? I feel very privileged to have found this axe. Very privileged. It really makes my mind work. Really makes my mind work. You know? That so many years have gone by, and this fella is still here, and now it's being used. This axe, I think it was destined to be found and put back to its purpose. And it is. I split a lot of wood with it. Every year I split wood with it. And it'll be here when I'm dead and gone. Now think about that. 110 years ago, when whoever bought that axe, they're dead and gone. Almost everybody that used that for the first 50 years, they're dead and gone. You'd have to be, let's say you were 10 years old and you were the last person splitting wood with it and left it stuck in the stump. You'd be 70 years old right now. Is there some 70, 75, 80-year-old person out there that occasionally thinks, you know, we should have gone back to that old campsite and gotten our axe? That's the best you could do. Maybe find one of them old folks that left the axe behind, and they could tell you maybe something about that axe in the years before that, because maybe they heard from the person they got the axe from what it did in that earlier 50 years. It's the only way you'd find out. But boy, does it make your imagination run. Where has that axe been and what has it done? So there you go, folks. There's an axe tale for you. I hope you enjoyed this. If you're new to the channel, hey, subscribe, would you? Ring the bell. You ring the bell, you'll know when I'm doing a video or a live stream. And hey, if you like the video, give it a thumbs up, would you? And I love your comments, guys. And if you enjoyed Axe Tale and Axe Tale, hey, check out my other videos. Now this video is coming from East Twin Lake Campground, where I'm hosting, and I'll have the playlist linked at the tail end. So until the next time, guys, you know Sty loves you, and he wants to see you get outdoors, take in the fresh air, enjoy life every moment, every day, for the rest of your life. And until later, you all have a very, very nice day. Bye-bye.